Hey, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Today, I'm excited to have a special guest with me, Mr. Kenji Lopez-alt, author of The Food Lab, creator on Serious Eats, and many other places. I can't wait to introduce you guys to Kenji. I'll be right back.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey, I want to welcome back Inkbird Products as a sponsor of the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird makes one of the best Wi-Fi 4 Pro barbecue thermometers that I've ever seen out there. The IBBQ4T is 100% rechargeable USB 4 probe Wi-Fi enabled barbecue thermometer, and it usually sells for under $100. Check it out, the link below for the Inkbird Wi-Fi IBBQ4T 4 Pro barbecue thermometer. Welcome back, Inkbird Products. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today I've got a really special guest. I've got Kenji Lopez-alt, or J. Kenji Lopez-alt, as his full name is. And I'm sure if you don't know who he is, I don't know where you've been, under a rock, but he is the author of The Food Lab. He is from Serious Eats, has his own restaurant called Worst Hall out in San Francisco now. Welcome, Kenji. Just give me a little bit of history of who you are real quick, and then we'll have a great conversation, I'm sure.
I'm Kenji Lopez-alt. You can just call me Kenji. As you said, I'm the chef at a restaurant. It's actually San Mateo, a little south of San Francisco, called Worst Hall. I'm the author of The Food Lab, Better Home Cooking Through Science, which is a book as well as a column on SeriousEats.com. What else do I do? I'm a New York Times food columnist, and I'm now officially a children's book author because my children's book, Every Night is Pizza Night, is out September 1st of this year, 2020.
I saw that, and you do have a toddler, so I'm sure that was a lot of your inspiration to see if you could put something out there for is it your daughter, correct?
It's a daughter, for her. Written basically just for her. So
yeah, but now you can, everybody else can kind of enjoy it as well because I
hope so.
Yeah, great. So looking at your history, you really didn't study cooking in your early years. You went to college for architecture. So what got you involved in cooking?
It was a summer job, actually. I was a biology major when I started college, and I'd spent a couple summers and winter break periods working in biology labs. I pretty quickly realized after working a few months in labs, that lab work, which is what you basically do studying biology after school for a number of years, the lab work wasn't really up my alley. It was a little bit too slow paced for me. And so I kind of decided then that I was not going to continue pursuing my biology degree. I was going to switch majors. And so for the summer after my sophomore year, I didn't really know what to do. So I went around town looking for a job as a server, a waiter. And I walked into a restaurant that needed a cook. It was actually called Fire and Ice, not Fire and Water, but Fire and Ice. It was like a Mongolian grill style place in Harvard Square. And I got a job as a prep cook there. And then eventually, after a couple of weeks, I got promoted to Knight of the Round Grill. So I was one of those guys in the center with the big cast iron grill that would take your food and grill it for you, and throw asparagus tips in the air with my spatulas and stuff like that. So it was just a summer job. And I loved it. I loved everything about working in a kitchen. Everything from, the day-to-day, the mundane tasks, like peeling onions and chopping potatoes and all that stuff. And to the, sort of to the adrenaline and the teamwork and the interfacing with customers and the hospitality elements of it. So basically after that summer, I switched to an architecture degree, which I graduated with. But basically after that summer, I continued working in restaurants, either part or full-time through college, and then went straight into them after college full-time. Worked for a number of years in restaurants before switching over to the recipe writing and publishing side of it.
Now, did you ever attend any culinary classes or schools or anything like that? Is it strictly just a hands-on experience?
Yeah, yep, all on the job. So I worked in a huge variety of restaurants, ranging from Mongolian grill to a pizza place to I was an oyster shucker at an oyster bar. I worked at a charcuterie bar, Spanish restaurants, some high, more sort of high end French and Italian places. I tried to work as many different places as I could to get as much, get as much knowledge as I could. And I read a ton. I was a chef at a fraternity house. It was a co-ed fraternity house that was around 80% international students. And so I got a lot of opportunities to talk with students about foods from their homes. What I did there was I tried for the entire 2 years that I was working as a fraternity chef to never repeat the same meal. And every Sunday I would work with one of the students there to try and cook dishes from their home country for the rest of the house. So I got a lot of experience learning sort of firsthand what food from various cultures around the world, which I found invaluable. Because at the time, obviously, I was just finished school and I was working as a line cook, and I barely had any money, so traveling wasn't really
right.
In the equation for me. So I felt that very lucky to have access to interactions with so many people from around the world to really sort of expand my repertoire of techniques and flavors and understanding of food.
Yeah, well, when I was young, when I first started in restaurants too, I mean, I think I was 16. I started washing dishes, and not too long after that, I was able to move to a line cook, and I worked at different restaurants. I worked for about 10 years, and I realized that you really couldn't support a family in that business. Like you said, when you're a line cook or something like that, it's kind of hard. You got to work 2 jobs to try to make ends meet.
Yep.
So I kind of changed careers and went into banking, but it did spark my love of cooking, and I never gave that up. I've cooked my entire life, and always, look for different ways to cook so I can understand how you caught the bug, especially, if it's something that you're really passionate about. And that's what it sounds like to me, is that you thought you were going to do something else, but you got passionate about something and you made it into a career, even though that wasn't the path you were aiming for.
Yeah.
hit that fork in the road and went down a different one, which is great.
Yeah. That's always sort of been my philosophy whenever there's any kind of, career move or any kind of life decision. It's like, I've never really thought too hard about predefining a career path for myself. My sort of philosophy is like, as long as I'm learning something new, and as long as I'm enjoying it, then, it doesn't really matter how much money I'm currently making at it, as long as as long as I'm making enough to at least survive. Because, I've known for myself since, even middle school or high school that I do best at the things that I'm passionate about. And so, whenever I make a career move, I think to myself, all right, which one of these things am I more passionate about? Which fork on this, which path in this fork looks like the more exciting one and the one that I'm going to enjoy more. And generally the one I'm going to enjoy more is the one I'm going to do better at. And so hopefully that leads to, career success down the line, which luckily it's worked out so far.
Yeah, I think if we all did that, like I said, I got into banking. It wasn't because I love banking, but it was more of a financial need, and it just kind of fell in my lap that I was able to move into it. And, but I still was able to keep that passion going for cooking. And this is kind of what I'm doing now. I kind of taken my passion and love of cooking and turning it into something, down the road, I get ready to retire. It'll still have some kind of income. I can, still have some, something to do with it. But, banking I can get rid of that. But so the influence of your dad was a geneticist. And so was he kind of gearing you towards your initial college, you studying chemistry and all that, or?
No, my dad has never put pressure on me to be a scientist. My mom certainly put a lot of pressure on me to be a scientist. Scientist, doctor, or lawyer is what she wanted. But no, my dad actually has never really put pressure on, and I have 2 sisters as well, who are now both well, one is a vet and the other is a scientist, ecologist. But the science stuff is something that my grandfather was a professor of organic chemistry. My father is a professor of genetics. And so there's a lot of science sort of just in our house growing up. And because of that, I think I got a good grasp of how science works and what labs are like and everything like that. So there was never any direct pressure from my dad to be a scientist, but certainly there was a lot of influence in terms of me, enjoying and loving science growing up. My dad, when I when I told my parents after I graduated from college, when I told my parents that I'm going to go work at a restaurant, like my mom was like deeply disappointed deeply disappointed. But my dad was actually pretty excited about it, because my dad loves food and he likes going out to eat. And so he thought it was really cool that he had a place that he could like bring his friends. He's like, yeah, there's my son working there. So he thought that was pretty cool.
Well, how much of that influenced you into, making writing the food lab? Because you do a lot of, explaining and experimenting in that book. So it's, so you got the scientific method down. So you kind of took that and put it into food, which not a lot of people have. It's, usually recipes and this, that, or the other thing, but you do a lot of explaining of whys. And that's one of the things I like about it. And that's one of the reasons I like Meathead Goldwyn so much,
right.
Is because it's the why and how. It's not just do it this way because I said so,
Right. I mean, a big influence, when I was working as a line cook, I always had questions, to the point where it like annoyed my chefs and coworkers, but I always had questions about why we were doing things certain ways. And to me, there weren't that many, there were some really good books out there. There's like Carol McGee's On Food and Cooking that explains a lot of the science behind it, but there wasn't a ton of writing out there that made it really applicable to cooking. Like it was always like sort of the science of food was a separate thing from the science from actual cooking. And so when I started writing the food lab, really I was writing it sort of for myself. It's like I have all these questions I want answered. I want to know, like, why does the eggshell sometimes stick to the egg when you boil it and sometimes it doesn't? And I couldn't find any satisfactory answers. So I just did what came naturally to me, which was like, all right, well, let's test it and let's design some experiments and try and really figure out why. And that became the first food lab column, which I wrote for Serious Eats. And it was like a thing that I was just doing for myself. I didn't really know if people were going to find it interesting or read it, because it was like 3,000 words on boiling an egg is a lot of words on just how to boil an egg. But luckily it turns out that people were interested in it also. So it just kind of grew from there. The whole the food lab thing grew from there. And it turned out to be sort of the ideal job for me. It let me combine my passion for cooking with my passion for science and my love of science. And it was like the ideal job. For the I don't remember how many years I was doing it full time for Serious Eats, something like 6 or 7 years full time for Serious Eats. Basically from like the time I started, 2010 or so, until my daughter was born, 2017. So 7 years. My full time job was just exploring these cooking questions that I would have liked. If I had a different job, if I had a day job where I was working in an office 9 to 5, I would have come home and done the same kinds of stuff from 5 p.m. until I went to bed.
You just got paid to do it. Yeah.
It just turns out I got paid to do it, and I didn't have to have another job. So it was great.
So how did you make the move from working in restaurants to you jumped to Cooks Illustrated before you went to Serious Eats? So how did that kind of come about from, because I worked in restaurants and I didn't see people coming in and going, hey, line cook, come here, let's go to work for for a magazine or something. So how did that kind of work out?
By the time I switched from restaurants to magazines, so my first magazine job was at Cooks Illustrated, which is based in Boston, based in Brookline, Massachusetts. I had been working in restaurants full time for I think like 5 or 6 years, something like that, and I worked with a number of chefs and Barbara Lynch and Ken Oringer, who both have multiple restaurants, and so I got lots of opportunities to work at very different kinds of places, but. I think like you, when you switched careers, I was starting to realizing I was starting to burn out a little bit, and that this was not a viable career option for my entire life. And moreover, it was like, I felt that up until that point, like every time I started working at a new restaurant, it was like, I was learning brand new skills, brand new techniques. And by that time, I had worked at all of Ken Oranger's restaurants. I was still working with him. I was like the headline cook at Clio. And so really I was in much more of a sort of teaching position than a learning position. Like I knew every technique and dish at the restaurant back to front. And so I felt like I wasn't really learning too much. And so I knew at some point soon I was going to have to either make the transition to a completely different type of restaurant so I can start learning again, or switch to something different. And it seemed like, my friend then basically just showed me a job listing for Cooks Illustrated, which I'd never heard of at the time. I hadn't heard of the magazine. But, the job listing said, looking for recipe testers. And I looked at the magazine. I was like, oh, they do a little bit of science and they do some food. Maybe it's worth looking into. seeing what the other side of this profession is like, you know, the writing and recipe development side of it. And yeah, so that's basically how I made the transition. It was just, I just stumbled upon a job listing, and I enjoyed it. You know, I really enjoyed working at Cooks Illustrated, because, you know, it did give me the opportunity to explore food science and do some testing. It gave me a more steady paycheck, better hours. You know,
the pressure probably was a lot less too.
The pressure was less, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, it's weird if you stayed past 5 p.m. there. You know, it was a 9 to 5 place. It was weird if you spent extra hours, whereas at a restaurant, it's like if you leave at the time you're supposed to leave, people think you're slacking. At least back in the day, I don't know, you know, it's maybe not quite that way anymore, but at the time it was. You know, the only issue I had with Cooks Illustrated was that, you know, the Cooks Illustrated audience at the time was just skewed sort of older, and sort of had, you know, it was generally older people from the Midwest who were very into American food, you know, which is great, but it didn't give many opportunities to explore sort of other food from other cultures, which they do more of these days. You know, as I think everybody in the U.S., their palates are expanding more and more with the internet and the availability of ingredients and knowledge of techniques and stuff. But you know, so for me, the types of food we were cooking, it was a whole lot of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, you know. And so I got a little bit bored of that eventually, which is why, you know, transitioning over to Serious Eats, which was completely web-based and therefore has an audience that, you know, so in a print publication, you have a built-in audience, right? You have a fixed audience, a fixed subscriber base that doesn't change. And so all of the articles have to cater to your subscriber base.
Right.
Whereas when you're writing online, you don't have a fixed audience. You know, like one set of people might read one type of article, but another set of people are going to read a different type of article, which means that you're much less constricted. So, you know, as long as you're putting out good quality content, your audience is kind of going to find you, you know, which is something that's really appealing. But, you know, both writing and now, you know, now I do video and stuff online, and it's all sort of the same thing. It's like I can, whatever, as long as it's interesting to me, I can write about it and be guaranteed that somebody is going to find it, you know? So I don't really have to cater. I can write what I'm interested in rather than what the demographic of my subscriber base is interested in.
Well, and the benefit of that is that you get to pour your passion into it, and people, especially, you know, with the videos now, and we'll talk about your YouTube channel in a minute, but when you know, they can see your passion, they can feel your passion. If it's something that they can tell you're really getting into it. It's not like you said, a roasted chicken. You know, how many times can you write an article about a roasted chicken,
right?
Or
well,
you know, pot roast or meatloaf? You know, it's like,
yeah, according to Cooks Illustrated, 5 to 6 times a year, probably.
That's funny. But when you get passionate about something, when you're experimenting, you're trying new things, and you're trying to show people, I mean, the excitement kind of, you know, people will get you know, attached to that, mm-hmm. and follow you. And then that's when you got people that'll watch anything you do. And I want to talk about that in a little bit on your YouTube channel. But so when you got into Serious Eats, that was a little bit different than Cooks Illustrated, and you felt a little bit more freedom. And
yeah, that's
when you started writing the Food Lab, when you mm-hmm. were at Serious Eats.
Yeah, I felt more freedom, both in terms of the topics I could do, as well as the tone. You know, it's like Cooks Illustrated has a very specific tone to its articles, and no matter who writes it, it gets edited into this sort of Cooks Illustrated voice. You know, right. Whereas when you're writing online, you can really, you're much more free as to what you do, and in fact, people these days, people really connect with, you know, authenticity. You know, so it's like, you don't have to make your voice sound like a specific thing. You can just be yourself, and people appreciate that, you know. So that, you know, so the online on Serious Eats, that's where I really sort of developed my writing voice. You know, which is something that, you know, many writers will tell you that it's the most difficult thing to do, is finding your voice, like what makes your writing sound like you, and how do you write so that it sounds authentically like what's in your head, you know. And so that was a great opportunity for me, that I could, you know, I was writing so much. I was writing like 3 to 7 articles a week, just like the sheer volume of writing, which is still, you know, writers will tell you this, but the best way to get good at writing and the best way to find your voice is just do it a lot.
Yeah, do it a lot.
just like anything, you just do it a lot. And that's sort of how you find your voice. And so with Serious Eats, I was writing and cooking and testing. You know, I didn't have a kid at the time. Both my wife and I were really sort of career focused for the, you know, early on in our marriage for the, you know, until we didn't have our daughter until 8 years after we got married. It was because we were both really focusing on building our careers. And so basically, you know, like 9 a.m. till 4 a.m. Every day, I was testing, cooking, writing, etc. You know, so I would work on Serious Eat stuff from 9 till 10 p.m., 11 p.m. And then I would work on my book until, you know, my book was mostly written like from midnight to 4 a.m. My first book, which these days I cannot do because I have a daughter. So so that's why my second book is coming out much more slowly and much more deliberately than the first one. But yeah, you know, I loved it. Those years, it's just like, they went so fast because I was just doing what I love doing, and I was doing it basically all the time, nonstop. And I don't know, that's how you get good at something. You just do it a lot. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're really passionate about it, like you said, it doesn't feel like work to you. It's something you love to do. So
exactly.
And you know, everybody wants to do that. That's for sure. So what, you know, I talk about sous vide and barbecue a lot, and from what I do, and I kind of discovered sous vide about 2.5, 3 years ago, kind of stumbled into it. And then, you know, I saw a lot of your articles on Serious Eats about it. And I'm kind of like you, when I discover something or I find something I like, I throw myself into it. And, and I try to read everything I can, learn as much as I can. And then I like to show other people what I learned and what I found out. When did you start working with sous vide? Did you do that in the restaurants, or was that something you kind of stumbled on at Serious Eats and started playing around with there?
Yeah, so I started doing it in restaurants. So probably around, I don't know, 2003 or so was the first time I had heard of or seen sous vide. And starting then, we started using it more and more in restaurants. And then in late 2006, when I was at Cooks Illustrated, this was, you know, just after I'd finished working in restaurants, late 2006, my first recipe assignment at Cooks Illustrated was to write a recipe on cooking steak. And so, you know, at that time, you know, I'm sure you're familiar now with the thing called the reverse sear, which is where you start a steak in a low oven and finish it over high heat. At that time, there were, you know, nobody at Cooks Illustrated had ever heard of it. I had never heard of it. Nobody had really seen it at all. You know, after that article came out, Meathead Goldwyn from Amazing Ribs later told me, oh yeah, there was like this guy Chris Finney who was doing it on writing about it on barbecue forums, like in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, something like that. But at when I was at Cooks Illustrated, my goal was basically like, all right, here we're doing this thing called sous vide at restaurants, but the devices cost $1,500, $2,000. They produce really great results. How do we mimic that for a home cook? And so that's how I came up with you know, that technique, which is now called the reverse sear. But it was basically an attempt to imitate sous vide for home cooks. And then that article was published. It became very popular. And you know, and these days now you can get a sous vide device for $79, $80. And you know, when I started writing for Serious Eats around 2009 or 2010, I think one of my first articles there was a sort of update on that technique, which we called, you know, beer cooler sous vide, where you don't need a special device. You just fill up a big cooler with hot water at a precise temperature, and then it holds that temperature long enough to cook something like a steak or a chicken breast. You won't be able to do like 48-hour short ribs in there, but you can do a steak or a chicken that takes like 45 minutes to cook. Beer cooler sous vide. So yeah, you know, sous vide has gone through a number of iterations. These days, like at my restaurant, when we first opened the restaurant, we used sous vide a bunch for our sausages, also for slow cooking bacon, things like that. But now we spent the money to buy a couple of CVAP ovens, which are essentially, you know, they can accomplish a very similar goal, but you know, they're expensive ovens that hold precise humidity levels and precise temperatures inside, so that you don't have to use the plastic bags. You don't have to worry about filling up the water bath and maintaining the water level, et cetera. So now, you know, like we're a sausage hall, a beer garden. So all of our sausages are cooked in a CVAP oven to 135 degrees Fahrenheit with steam injected, so that they stay really nice and juicy, and they basically stay in there through service. And then when you place an order, it comes out of the oven, gets finished on a flat top to crisp up and brown the exterior. So, you know, a sausage that would normally take say 12 to 15 minutes to cook from raw, we can serve within 3 to 4 minutes, and it actually comes out much juicier than it would be if you were to just cook it in an oven or the whole way on a stovetop. Sous vide and CVAPs, they're all great especially for consistency and making things foolproof.
Yeah, and that's the precise temperature thing that I try to explain to people, because especially when they're new and they're just trying to figure out what sous vide is, and well, it cooks a great steak. Well, it does a lot more because it's precise temperature cooking. And I sous vide sausages all the time for that reason. Like you said, you could cook it to a precise temperature all the way through, and then throw it on the flat top or in a pan to crisp it up, and then it's still juicy. It didn't overcook. It didn't lose all the moisture because you were letting it, all the moisture that was in the sausage evaporate out.
Yeah. So, and it lets you hold it until you're ready to eat it. So it's like when you cook a sausage the normal way over on a grill or in the oven or whatever, you have to be ready to eat it when it's done cooking. Whereas with sous vide, it can sit at that temperature for hours with and still be juicy. And then when you're ready to eat it, all you have to do is crisp up the outside, and it's ready to go.
One of the things I love to do, and that's where it comes into play with doing it with barbecue, is doing like a brisket or something and making it medium rare in the sous vide and then throwing it on the smoker and getting some smoke to it. And that's kind of what I explain to people is I kind of try to make things that you can't make any other way. With either the two different either the methods, like with smoking or sous vide, if you combine the two, you can make something you can't make with either one of those.
Like you can take a tough cut of meat, like a pork shoulder or a brisket, and cook it over the course of a few days, and so that it'll stay medium rare and nice and pink and juicy, but all the connective tissue will also break down. So it's something that you like literally can't do without a precise without a precise cooking temperature.
And the method has grown so fast because of, like you said, when you first started, doing it in the restaurants, the devices cost $1,500 or more. Nowadays you can get one for, $50-$60, cheaper ones, but a good one's still $100, but still, it's, there's so much information out there now, and the prices have come down a lot, and people have gotten really into it. And just like you were mentioning, I think with all the advent of all these cooking shows, and it's happened in barbecue and outdoor cooking as well, with all these the cable TV shows and the cooking contests and all these celebrity chefs and stuff, people are getting more and more interested in cooking in their own house. So I think that's where people like you and me, people are looking to your book because they're doing more cooking at home. They're not going out, or they're not making just meatloaf or whatever anymore. They're trying to expand their mind, so they look at like your book and Serious Eats and all that, trying to find new things.
Yeah. And especially now, because of the pandemic, everybody's cooking, everybody's stuck at home. So a lot more people are cooking now.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple, actually yesterday I had one of the guys who owns a charcoal producing company, and, and I've had others, the grill representative companies that they can't keep supply of their products because people are buying it up. It's because they're staying home more, they're cooking at home. But it's not just the supply chain that's drying up. It's the people are buying a lot more of this stuff because they can't go anywhere. So let's talk about that. So you started Wursthall. You had some partners that kind of came to you and said, "Hey, we got this idea for a restaurant and we'd like you to be involved." Is that kind of how that happened? Or?
Yeah, basically. So initially it was going to be just a sort of consulting thing, which I've done with restaurants in the past. But for some reason this time, like when it, Eater wrote a story about the restaurant. And when they wrote the story, they said the headline line was like, "Kenji Lopez-alt is opening up a restaurant." And I was like, all right, I guess maybe I, like now that people think this is my restaurant, I need to be a little bit more involved in it. So we talked about it, and I became a full chef partner there. So yeah, it was the idea to do a beer hall. It wasn't set in stone when I joined, but that was my partner Adam's idea, because he owned a bar, and he has a good knowledge of beer and wine, and a lot of connection. There's a lot of local breweries that he has connections with already, business connections with already. So it seemed natural to do something sort of beer focused. And down where we live in San Mateo, there there's a lot of great dining, particularly, you know, like in regional Chinese and Japanese and some other cuisines, but there aren't that many sort of very family friendly, you know, places that are geared specifically towards families. And, you know, we looked at the success of a lot of sort of beer halls around the country and also in the Bay Area and thought, well, this is a good thing. You know, like people love beer in the Bay Area. We need like a really family friendly dining place, like a place where kids can be loud and run around and nobody cares. And so that's sort of where we started and where basically where we ended up, you know. It's gone through a few iterations. It's like, you know, early on we were a little bit more focused on like a full dining experience. And because we realized, you know, like a lot of people were coming in for like dates and special occasions and stuff, which is not really how we thought people would be. We thought it would be a much more casual place. But early on, people were coming in for dates and things like that, or people were driving down from the city to try the place because it was my restaurant, et cetera. But we've been slowly pushing it into the much more casual direction. And actually now that, you know, when the pandemic hit and shelter in place started and we closed down for a few months, when we reopened, we completely sort of reimagined it. So changed the menu, you know, and partly because we want to take it in this direction. We want it to be a much more sort of fun, casual place, but also partly out of necessity because we can no longer, you know, the type of food we were producing before required a full prep team and a full densely staffed line at night, you know, 5 to 6 line cooks on a Friday or Saturday night. And we just can't keep that staff anymore because of the safety issues, the spacing issues. So we had to redesign everything so that it could be prepared with crew kept, you know, 6 feet apart and with and a 2 to 3 person line at night max while still being able to keep up. So so our menu now is a lot smaller and a lot more sort of tightly focused on the core products that people have been coming to us for. So, you know, the sausages which are still completely made in house, our smash burger and our hot fried chicken sandwich, which is like, you know, 3 things people like to eat with beer.
Yeah. Well, that kind of explains a lot, you know, some of the stuff I wanted to cover about that. So when you got back into the restaurant side of it though, you know, because you had been out of it for a while, you would just, you know, working for Serious Eats and the other magazine and stuff. How was that to step back into the restaurant?
You know, it was exciting in many ways because it was the first restaurant where it was like, you know, my restaurant, and I wasn't just like a cook there, or I wasn't just the consultant there. It was like my restaurant, so that was pretty exciting and enjoyable. But you know, the downside of it, of course, is the hours in restaurants are terrible and very demanding and unpredictable because things are always going wrong, and you always have to be ready to fix any problem that comes up. And so, you know, it took a lot of time away from my family. My daughter was pretty young at the time, and it ended up taking away a lot more time from my family than I ever intended it to. And so, you know, after a while, I started, you know, having to very consciously make the decision. All right, like I need to be able to be a little bit more hands off with the restaurant. I need to trust my cooks more. I need to trust my partners more. To make some decisions and trust that even without me there all the time, it's going to be okay. And of course, it turns out it is. You know, it's like people step up.
It's just hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to do though when your name's on it.
Yeah. But you know, you hire good people. You make sure that everyone's in alignment as far as vision for the place goes, and everyone has an eye for quality. And then you know, people step up and problems. They don't take care of themselves, but people step up to take care of the problems, even when you're not there all the time. It's a hard thing to do, to learn to be hands off when something's your project. You know?
Well, I'm going to share a screen here, and it's going to be your website. So I want people to kind of see this is your main website, so they can pretty much find anything you're doing from this website right here, kenjilopez-alt.com. So you got your books, the newsletter. You have a newsletter, so I guess it tells people exactly what you're going to be doing next, and your books, and like you were saying, you got Every Night is Pizza Night, and that's available on Amazon, pretty much anywhere you get books, correct?
There's links to where you can buy my books. They are available on Amazon. I actually am pushing people to buy it from bookshop.org. So bookshop.org/shop/Kenji Lopez-alt. if you buy it from there, 10% of the sale goes to independent bookshops around the country, and then another 10% of the sales goes towards COVID disaster relief meals. So it goes towards feeding people who have been put in trouble by the pandemic.
Well, that's good. You got some examples of some of the pages of the food lab too. So that's
and
good.
On my website you can see both pages from inside my kids book and from the food lab.
Well, that's one thing I want to talk about too, because I have my own YouTube channel. I started it kind of after I kind of started what I'm doing on a Facebook group, and that's kind of how I started. So I want to put this Facebook group together talking about barbecue and sous vide and see how, and that grew pretty quick. Then I said, well, you know what, nobody's really doing that on YouTube, so let me kind of do that on YouTube, and that kind of grew, and so I kind of, just kind of went from one thing to another. Then the podcast, I said, well, I might as well do a podcast. So you've had this YouTube channel for a while, and you really didn't do a whole lot. You would post up some stuff every once in a while here and there, back when you were with Serious Eats and all that. But lately, with this pandemic, it looks like you're getting a lot more active on your videos on YouTube, and they're really popular. So
yeah,
how do you like doing those? I mean, since you're used to doing your writing, you really weren't a video person, before. So
yeah, I'm really enjoying them. So, actually, so as you said, I've had a YouTube channel for like 7 or 8 years, something like that. And I never really used to use it much. But sometime like 4 or 5 years ago, I just come back from a vacation where I had been like snorkeling, and I had a GoPro on my desk, and I was about to cook something at home. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just like try sticking this GoPro on my head and see what happens. When I cook with it, see how it looks. And so I did that, and then I stuck the video up, and it got a few views. I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then over the next few years, I did that a few times a year. Just every once in a while, I would stick a GoPro to my head and cook something. And then, and then back this February, I was looking at my YouTube channel because I was getting lots of notifications, and I was like, oh man, like one of these videos, like I'm just making a grilled cheese, and it has like 4 million views or something like that, like something crazy. So I was like, I guess people do like this format. And so I got a slightly better GoPro because the old videos, they're much shakier than the new ones, and the lighting's not great. So I got whatever, like a GoPro Hero 8, which is their newest one. And I started just recording some more videos of myself shooting. And then I was like, all right, well, people like the silent ones. I wonder if they'll like a little bit more explanation as to what I'm doing. And so I started experimenting with that also. So basically just like cooking what I was going to cook for my family anyway, and recording it and sort of explaining what I was doing as I was doing it. And people seem to like that. So it's great because it's easy for me to do. I don't really have to plan the videos in advance much. I basically just, whatever I want to cook, I cook it and I record it, and I don't make many edits either. That's sort of part of my philosophy is like, I want people to see everything. And like, I think of it sort of as those old, like Food Network 1.0 or old PBS cooking shows where it was 1 30-minute take with no edits, no magic of television. Now here we pull out like the fully cooked chicken from the oven. It's perfectly done. It's like a real, like a real old school cooking show. Right. And so that's how I think of it. It's like no edits, one take. If I make a mistake, I just roll with it. I explain what the mistake was, how I'm going to fix it. And I think people really appreciate that, like seeing, all right, like here's a professional who's really cooking at home. And I think people make us, at least the people who like following it, make a sort of strong connection with that, to see that, even professionals make mistakes from time to time, and it's really okay to make mistakes at home as long as you know how to deal with them as they arise. So it's working out well. For me, it's like, as soon as it becomes a lot of work, I'm probably going to stop doing it. But for now, it's not. For now, it's nice and easy and relaxed.
Well, that's the thing with YouTube. It's not like, this is not your main income. It's not a job. You're just doing it when you get the urge, and you're putting them up. You're putting them up on a regular basis now. But and some of the things that are some of your more popular videos are stuff that, like, your early morning breakfast quesadilla. I mean, it's not very hard, but you got over a million views on that. Your late night, burgers and sandwiches. People, you're getting over 300,000 views on just something you whipped up, for a snack. I mean, so people like what you're doing. It's obvious, or they wouldn't be watching and coming back,
Yeah.
and watching your stuff. So it's not like you have to, like you said, you don't have to put on airs. You don't have to make sure it's perfect. I mean, they're there to watch you cook in your kitchen the way you cook. So
Right. And, and then the nice thing about it is, the nice thing about working on YouTube, online, same as Serious Eats, it's like, I can do what I want to do. And if people like it, great. People can come and watch it if they like it, and that's great. And if they don't like it, there's like a million other YouTube channels out there, so it's like, I don't have to cater to my audience. I can just do what I want to do. And it's like, if you like it, cool. If you don't, then go find something else that you do like. It's like, I'm not making this show for you specifically. I'm making this because I enjoy making it.
One of the first things I learned was don't take the negative comments seriously, because a lot of people go on, YouTube or whatever, Facebook, just to bully people or try to, so and some people can't. They take, every negative comment personally, and it's like, you got to understand, there's some people out there, no matter what you do, they're going to come up with some kind of negative comment, because that's what they live for, the trolls. So, but if you're getting all these views and you're getting people subscribed to your channel, and you get plenty of, it's like Helen. I talked about this with Helen, because she really started getting some stupid people just saying stupid things, and it's like, Helen, just don't worry about those people.
Right.
You're always going to have them, so just move on, because you got plenty of people that love what you're doing.
Yeah. And as someone who for years I was the managing editor at Serious Eats, and Serious Eats, one of our important goals was to have a community that was sort of supportive and not toxic, because there's so many toxic communities online. And that requires, to do that, it does require sort of a lot of work. You have to constantly monitor comments. You have to make sure people are being nice to each other. And that's something that I also want on my YouTube channel. Like, I want people to be able to go into the comments and ask questions or find answers to things without having to read through a whole bunch of toxic junk that's going to ruin their day. And so, so I have a pretty zero tolerance policy. Like, if you're a jerk in my comments, then like your comments are going to get deleted, and you're just going to be blocked from the channel, and that's it. It's like, I don't, I believe in the Second Amendment and free speech, as far as petitioning the government and the true meaning of the Second Amendment, but I don't believe in free speech on online platforms, because if you let the trolls take control, they will, and then your entire comment section becomes useless.
Yeah, I had that when I first started my Facebook group. That's the first rule I put into place. If you are here just to be nasty to somebody else, or complain, or tell somebody their food looks like garbage, you can leave, or be moved, because, and I don't take anybody nasty comments on YouTube or anything. I just get rid of it, and I'll block them, and, I'll just move along, because you know what? This is my channel. This is my Facebook group. I make the rules. You don't. So,
right.
If you're here just to, get everybody, ticked off and think you're some kind of, bully, and then forget about it. You're gone. So, but yeah, great. I mean, I've watched a lot of your videos, and I just like, because you do it a little different than a lot of them. Like, you got the GoPro, so your point of view right there. They're watching you, look down at your pan while you're cooking, which a lot of people don't do it that way. So it's but you're very informative, and you explain what you're doing the whole time, because I guess that comes from your writing, history, because you're always writing and explaining how to cook stuff. So it's natural for you to, just talk it through while you're doing the video.
Part of it is the writing. It's also, a lot of it came from my first book tour. Because up until then, I'm still sort of scared of public speaking. And early on in my book tour, when I was talking to big groups or teaching classes and stuff, like, you could easily tell how nervous I was. Like, I would stutter and stammer and act nervous. But just like anything else, it's just the more you do it, the better you get at it. So, so in my book tour, it's like I'm talking at like 3 to 4 events a week for a few months. And you just sort of learn how to start talking while you're cooking, and especially when it's something I know about. It's like, I've been cooking for 20 years professionally, so I know what I'm doing, and as I'm doing it, I know why I'm doing it. So all I have to do is explain what the stream of consciousness that's in my head, and explain what I'm doing it as I'm doing it. And teaching classes helps you sort of gain that skill, which now translates pretty well to YouTube.
Exactly.
If you go, on YouTube, I think you can find videos that I did when I was at Cooks Illustrated, probably from like 2007 or 8, where when Cooks Illustrated was just starting its video program. So you can see videos of me from when I was like in my mid-20s trying to talk about how I was cooking, and it's so awkward, especially compared to now. So yeah, if you want to laugh, just look for old Kenji cooking videos on Cooks Illustrated.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fun to do because I've even had other YouTube guys on, like Malcolm Reed. He's a big barbecue guy, and he started his YouTube channel like 12 years ago, and one of the things he says, he likes to go back to those videos from 12 years ago and just shake his head because his whole style has changed in that time. That he's very his wife does all the camera work and editing and puts everything together for him. So if you look at a new video compared to what he did back then, it's totally 100% different. But, I think we all go through that. The more we do something, me too. I look at some of my earlier videos and I go, ooh, but you keep them out there because they, the people can see your growth as well. So what's coming up next for Kenji now? So you said you hit on, you're doing another book.
Yeah, so I'm doing a book about cooking in a wok. So if you've seen my YouTube channel recently, you'll see there's a lot of stuff about cooking in a wok on it. But my next book, it should be out fall of next year, fall of 2021, hopefully. It's going to be a big book on cooking in a wok. So not a Chinese cookbook, not any sort of specific Asian country, but just everything you can do in a wok. And it's going to be similar to the Food Lab in the sense that it's really going to stress sort of technique and science. If it's the most versatile pan in my kitchen. It's the one that I use the most often. And I think, once people learn how to use it well and learn the technique and some of the science behind it, I'm hoping it'll become the most useful pan in everyone's kitchen. Or at least people who enjoy the type of food that I do.
I've watched some of your YouTube videos, and I've watched some where you show different setups for the wok, like the indoor and the outdoor, and the different types of setups that you can do to just to be able to cook in the wok. So yeah, because a lot of people have this impression that in order to cook with the wok, you need like this powerful restaurant burner. But most people in China don't have powerful restaurant burners in their own homes, and they're still doing stir frying and cooking at home. So there are certain restaurant style dishes where those elements help, but you definitely don't need them. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do is translating wok techniques for home cooks, especially particularly for an American audience, because there's a lot of stuff out there about cooking about cooking in woks already, but not that much that has very specifically been geared towards an American home cook, with the equipment and the ingredients that we can get here. Cool. Anything else you got coming up? I mean, are you just continually doing the YouTube videos, and you got Worstall? You're open again, but it's all outdoor seating. So
right, exactly, open for outdoor only. No, as far as other things, I have plans on some more kids books in the future. After I finish this wok book, I'm probably going to take a break from cookbook writing for a while, just because it's sort of occupied my life for the last 10 years. So I want to try some new things out. Yeah, probably in the future, I would say I'm going to be looking forward to writing some more kids book, doing some more video stuff, and maybe, I don't know, maybe trying something other than cooking for a little while too. Who knows?
Do you still contribute to Serious Eats at all, or
I do, yeah. I not obviously not the 3 to 5 times a week I was doing before, but I do. I'm working right now on a updated backyard pizza oven review, as well as a review of outdoor wok burners, so high output wok burners. If you have a backyard and you want to cook certain wok dishes like they do in a restaurant, I'm reviewing sort of all the options you have there and making a recommendation on them. So that'll be out on Serious Eats. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but the article should be up on August 25th. So
yeah, this will probably be early September. So
okay, so it'll probably already be out by the time you read. Okay. By the time you hear this.
Now, if they go to your website and sign up for your newsletter, you kind of explain, when you got new things coming out, of course.
Yeah. My newsletter, I very, very rarely send it out, so it's not going to spam you with anything. So
that's good.
You'll get a notice when my kids book comes out. So in a couple of weeks, if you sign up for it, you'll get a notice when my kids book comes out. You might get notices if I'm working on any kind of exciting project. But yeah, it's not like one of those things that's going to spam your inbox daily. It'll be a couple times a year at most is how often I send it.
Another email from Kenji,
Yeah.
It's like every day. I got some of those. It's like, I don't even know how I got signed up for this one, but every day.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm on a list that's sending me something every day, it's going to it's going straight to spam. Like, I can't deal with that volume.
I understand that. Well, I want to thank you for being on. I know you got some other things you got going on today, but I really appreciate you taking the time and, talking with me today. I think my followers are really going to like that, but make sure you check out Kenji lopez-alt.com. That's his website. Check out the YouTube channel. Check out the Worst Hall if you're in the Bay Area in California and San Francisco and all that. Thanks again. And also check out Serious Eats. And there's a lot of information still on there that I go back to all the time, especially the sous vide stuff. So, but thanks again for being on. Anything else you want to say, or?
No, thank you so much for having me. This is a nice call.
Well, I appreciate you being on, and thanks again. And I'll see you guys on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again for following us on the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I want to thank Kenji one more time for being on. Make sure you check out the links below. Check out KenjiLopezAlt.com. Check out Serious Eats. Make sure you check out his book on Amazon or on his website. But thanks again for following the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Make sure you check us out on our Facebook page, Facebook group, YouTube channel. And I'll see you again on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.